This video is brought to you by John Robson Guitar Tuition. If you enjoy the content, please consider supporting the channel by enrolling on a course, purchasing some guitar lessons or a t-shirt, or you can join my Patreon. Now, on with the show.
Hello chaps, welcome once again to John Robson Guitar Tuition. As always, I do hope you're well. Welcome to the final instalment, in fact, of the little series I've been doing on how to play blues lead guitar. So far in this series we've looked at the minor pentatonic scale, the Dorian and Mixolydian modes. We've looked at targeting chord notes and using arpeggios to create a sense of flow and movement from one chord to another. Last time we took a look at the subtle and fine art of phrasing, and today we're going to round things off by having a look at some exotic bebop fusion-y kind of licks, the sort of thing that has its origins way back in the playing of someone like Charlie Christian, or is evident today in the solos of people like Josh Smith and Robin Ford, for example. So, without further ado, here is a little solo where I'm using some of those licks. I'm sure you'll notice them when you hear them. And then I'm going to spend a bit of time explaining exactly what's going on. Here it is. Okay then, so here is our standard 12-bar blues chord sequence that we're dealing with here. The 1, 4 and 5 chords, G7, C7 and D7. And there are a couple of points in this chord sequence where you can start having a little bit of spicy, jazzy fun. And whereabouts are those? Well, for that we need to consult the cycle of fourths. Here it is. What is the cycle of fourths? Well, it's basically what happens if you go 4 notes up a major scale repeatedly. So if I take a C major scale and go 4 notes up that, 1, 2, 3, 4, that takes me to F. If I then take an F major scale and go 4 notes up an F major scale, it comes to a B flat, and so on. If I was to go 4 notes up a B flat major scale here, it takes me to E flat, and so on and so on. Each time I go up a new major scale based on the 4th note of the previous one, and eventually you end up on a G major scale, you go 4 notes up that, and you end up back on a C again. So it's a cycle of fourths, hence the name. But where a chord sequence ascends by a fourth, that's where you can start having some jazzy kind of fun. And there are 2 points in this chord sequence where that happens, where we go from the 1 chord to the 4 chord, the G7 to the C7, G to C is going up a fourth. So that's one place where we can do this kind of jazzy stuff. The other place is on the D, right at the end, the D7, when it comes back round to the G7 for a beginning of a new cycle. D to G is going up a fourth. So those are the places where you can inject a little bit of spiciness. So that's what we're going to be doing. And all of the examples that I'm going to show you here are based on the G to C part of the chord sequence. But, you know, you shouldn't have any problems transposing to get on into the D going to G part of the chord sequence. Just, move these ideas along the neck accordingly. So we're going to begin with
Tritone Substitution.
Yes, indeed. Tritone substitution. Sounds complicated, but don't panic. First of all, let's have a look at what that actually means. Tritone is just a musical jargon way of saying 6 frets, basically. So it's a 6 fret substitution. So we've got a G7 chord here. And if I go 6 frets away from G7, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, I come to D flat 7th. And let's kind of move those two chords close to each other on the neck like this in these diagrams here. Now, what you can see is that both of these chords share a pair of notes. There is a B note and an F note in each chord. And it's that kind of, that sort of combination of those two notes, which if you want the jargon term for it, it's the 3rd and the flat 7th, that essentially give any 7th chord its innate character. So for instance, if I play the B note and the F note and then stick a G note underneath it, that sounds basically like a G7 chord. Likewise, if I take the B note and the F note and put a D flat note underneath it, that now sounds like a D flat 7th chord. So we can kind of think of these two chords in this sort of circumstance as being kind of interchangeable, or chords that we could add together, for example, which is exactly what we're going to do here. Let's add the G7 and the D flat 7 together. And what you can see there is that the D flat is a flattened 5th, or a flat 5 with respect to the G7, which is the chord we're playing over actually, isn't it? So then the A flat is a flat 9th with respect to the G7 chord. So you add those two chords together and you get a chord called G7 flat 5 flat 9, which I'm going to try and attempt to put my fingers into here, and it sounds like this, which is an ugly sounding chord, isn't it? But it's its ugliness which gives it its kind of function. That chord sounds really good resolving to that chord, the C chord. Okay, so we can, it just sounds sort of exotic and spicy when you do that. Here, I'll do it again. So G7 flat 5 flat 9 to C. Works beautifully. So if we can impart a little bit of that spiciness that we get by adding those two chords together, then that's going to give us a nice jazzy sound as we change from the G7 chord to the C7 chord. And all you got to do is play over that final part of the G7. All you got to do is play a D flat 7th arpeggio. Here's a couple of shapes. That's one there, and here's another one. Like that, and both of those shapes, along with all of the other diagrams that we're going to look at today, are available for my Patreon supporters to download and print off and basically kind of refer to in future. So if I play a D flat 7 arpeggio over the top of a G7 chord, as I say, that gives us a G7 flat 5 flat 9 chord, and that's what we call an altered chord. Okay, an altered dominant chord, and these are the kind of sounds that give that sort of jazzy spiciness, really. And an altered dominant chord is any chord, any dominant 7th chord like G7, with either a sharpened or a flattened 5th, or a sharpened or a flattened 9th. That's it. Okay, so tell you what, let's listen to a lick that you can create simply by playing that D flat 7 arpeggio over the top of a G7 chord. Here it is. And quite a spicy sound there coming from that altered dominant sound. The next thing we're going to do is take a look at a scale that is particularly useful in these circumstances. This is
Half step, whole step, diminished scale.
Okay, this scale is made up of alternating 1 fret and 2 fret intervals. So it would go like this. If we start on the G note, that's going to give us G, A flat, B flat, B, D flat, D, E, F, G, and then we can go up another octave. Like that. And once again, that scale pattern is available to download. Now, the notes that you can see there that are coloured in, I think, orange on the graphic, those are the root notes. Basically this pattern will repeat every 3 frets because it's 1 fret, then 2 frets, 1 fret, then 2 frets, 1 fret, then 2 frets as you go up the scale. So if you move that pattern up in 3 fret lumps along the neck, it will basically be the same scale. And if you take the G note that's available in that scale, the B note, the C sharp or D flat note, and the F note, that's giving you a G7 flat 5. Okay? If you add the A flat note in, that's giving you a G7 flat 9. So it's giving us this kind of altered dominant kind of sound. And if you play a lick based upon this scale, let's just run through the scale one more time. If you play a lick using those notes, it might sound a bit like this. So the half step, whole step, diminished scale, a particular favourite of a certain Mr. Robin Ford, which is kind of where I learned it from. Anyway, the final little thing I'm going to show you now is called
The whole tone scale.
Indeed, the whole tone scale, so called because it is made up of notes that are a whole tone or 2 frets apart. And the great thing about this is because all of the notes in the scale are equidistant, that means that any note can effectively be treated as the root note of the scale, which is handy. So here's what it looks like. See if I can remember this. There's the whole tone scale, and basically that scale you can get the G note, the B note, the C sharp note, and the F note that's in that scale, and you've got a G7 flat 5. You could take the G note, the B note, the D sharp, and the F, and you've got a G7 sharp 5. So again, an altered dominant chord is a 7th chord with either a sharpened or flattened 5th or a sharpened or flattened 9th. So we've got sharp and flattened 5ths in that scale, and it gives that sort of exotic altered dominant sound. Here's a lick which uses the whole tone scale, and you'll hear what I mean. So there you go, Tritone Substitution, the half step, whole step, diminished scale, and the whole tone scale. 3 of my favourite ways of adding a little bit of jazzy, spicy tension into a blues at that point where the 1 chord goes up to the 4 chord, or as I say, you can do it where the 5 chord right at the end comes back to the 1 chord again. Hopefully you can see that this is not some, mystical, really intense, difficult kind of thing to get your head around. It is, it's doable, basically. You're not going to be playing licks like this in 5 minutes flat, but, if you apply yourself, it shouldn't take you too long. When I first started using these ideas, it took me maybe a month or so before I was comfortable using them in a solo, and boy, do these ideas turn heads when you kind of throw them in every now and again. So, whatever you do, have some fun with them. And of course I was using my Scott Guitars UK John Robson signature model throughout all of that. Fantastically versatile guitar, exquisitely built, real high-end, top-end boutique instrument for a price that might just surprise you. I'll link to Scott Guitars' website down in the description box below. Check them out. Anyway, back to business. The example licks that you saw me play in that little clip, along with the solo that kicked it all off, they're all tabbed out in both Guitar Pro and PDF formats, along with a jam track to play along with. You get all of the scale diagrams and scale patterns and everything that you saw in that clip, as well as the clip itself, obviously, to download and keep. And that's all up on my Patreon page. There's the address, link in the description. Now, if you are one of my Patreon supporters, first of all, thank you very, very much. From the bottom of my heart, it really is appreciated. Then you already have access to all of the resources that have gone along with this series, you know, the kind of the tabs and the jam track and everything like that, you know, and all of the kind of explanation clips and everything. So you already have access to all of that sort of stuff. But if you're not a Patreon supporter and you would like access to it, but you don't want to kind of sign up for a regular thing, then let me know in the comments section below if you'd be up for this. I can collate it all together as a little mini course to download for a very reasonable price. Let me know what you think. If that's something you'd be interested in, I will crack on and get that organised. Anyway, folks, that is pretty much it for today. I do hope you've enjoyed the video and found it useful and informative. And if you have, please hit the subscribe button and the notification bell if you haven't already done so. And why not give me a like while you're at it? Where are we today? It's Wednesday today, so I'll just remind you, don't forget the live stream, 5 PM UK time on Friday, where we sit around for an hour and have a beer and chat about music and guitars, amongst other things. Whatever crops up is what we have a natter about. Great way to kick off the weekend. I'd love to see you there. But for now, I'll bid you all a good day and say thank you so much for watching. Thank you for your time. Look after yourselves, folks. Stay well, stay safe, and above all, stay sane. Bye for now.